name is Tome Ostalrich. I'm the director of the Center for Ignatian Spirituality. Welcome to this lecture that we have entitled The Dream of God, A Spiritual Journey Through Poetry by Father Tom J. Fitzpatrick, S.J. Father Tom Fitzpatrick, through his 70 years as Jesuit, has lived a life very rich in varied human experience. For one, he taught in the theology department here at Boston College for 11 years. Very significant for his spiritual journey was his service in the Middle East, both in Amman, Jordan, and Jerusalem for over 20 years. Father Fitzpatrick says that in living and working within the human tragedy of the Middle East, he lost his theology. He stresses he did not lose his faith, but he found that he needed a simpler, more direct language to talk about God in face of the extreme pain in the Middle East. This need has come to fruit over the past 5 years in poetry and brief stories. We today, in the context of EXPRESSO Your Faith Week, we ask him to come to our campus and share his personal story with all of us. For sure, we will benefit in hearing his struggle to put his spiritual journey into words. His participation will last for about 30 minutes, and then we'll have a few minutes for questions and answers. So join me with a round of applause to welcome Father Fitzpatrick of the Society of Jesus.
It's on, I believe. Can you hear me okay? Okay. Well, thank you very, very much, Shomura. I'm very honored to be here. It's like coming home for me. I have a BA, I have an MA from Boston College, and I spent many wonderful years here as a young Jesuit, over 50 years ago. I'm quite old, but I'm very happy to be back. Tomer mentioned that one of the occasions of my writing, which you might call poetry or whatever you call it, is my time in the Middle East. I spent over 20 years in the Middle East, 10 years in Jordan, Amman, Jordan, and 10 years in Jerusalem. And they were very difficult years for me because of the extreme of the human tragedy that was there, that continues there, and even we see in these days has intensified dramatically. And within that, I found that my language about God somehow or other was not adequate. But out of that, ironically, coming back here to the United States, this is where I began to write what I feel for myself is a kind of simpler, more direct, and maybe more feeling-filled expression. You have copies, if you want to take them, on the table of, I think, most of the stuff that I will read. I'm not sure. I've changed some things in the meantime. But I would ask you, please be disciplined not to read them while I'm reciting. So this is a professor telling you not to read, because I enjoy that people just, first of all, listen. So I will go through it. I may make a few comments along the way that may be helpful for the context of the piece. But I will tell you also that I would be very open if anyone wants to get in contact with me for any further discussion. You have my email on the page here. I'd be delighted to meet and talk further about individual pieces or in small groups. So with that, let me just begin. This first one is called You and I. That you are you is significant for me as me. God loved you so much, God created you. God loved me so much, God created me. We are deeply connected. You are the image of God's love. I am the image of God's love. Without you, God would be missing something precious. Without you, God, in the depths of God, would not be the same. Because God's love of you is so important for God, created in love, I would not be the same without God's love of you. This next one is a little story. It's a very accurate as I can, of an incident in Bethlehem when Bethlehem was under curfew by the Israelis. And let me just read it. It's called The 15-Minute Hijack. The relationship between Israel and Palestine has been bitter, unstable, violent for many decades. In difficult times, the main checkpoint from Jerusalem into the West Bank, the occupied territories at Bethlehem, is shut down. While I was Superior Director of the Pontifical Biblical Institute in Jerusalem, I enjoyed a close relationship with Bethlehem University and often visited the Christian brothers who founded and staffed the school. Sometime in the year 2000, in an evening already dark, I could enter Bethlehem through the main checkpoint. I could not enter Bethlehem through the main checkpoint. There was a curfew on all of the West Bank. But I knew a back way to sneak in. I drove to that entry point and entered unchecked. I drove slowly with lights out through deserted streets, darkened streets, with shattered dark houses on each side. At a little distance before me, I noticed a small group of people standing in the middle of the road, signaling me to stop. I did not know if they were Israeli soldiers or Palestinians. I approached slowly and stopped. They were 5 Palestinian teenagers, about 13, with guns. Several were machine guns. They rushed my car. They learned I was an American in a car with a Jordanian number plate. Curious, they swarmed around my car, banging on it, waving their guns. This could all go very bad. I tried a little Arabic, saying, "Imshi," go away, like talking to small children. This had a good effect. They laughed and swarmed at my window. I heard in broken English, "Where are you going?" I told them I was going to Bethlehem University. This changed the mood immediately. The 5 of them squeezed into my car to escort me to the university. I had no say in the matter. The gun-waving kids were in charge. I was being hijacked. Arriving at the university, we were like a jubilant, very little parade. At the gates of the university, an Arab guard approached the car and very quickly, assessing the situation, immediately and sternly took charge. He told the young teenagers to get out of the car, take their guns and themselves and go home. Having now a little fun, I thank the kids for escorting me and protecting me. What saved the situation from very easily going seriously wrong was the reputation of the Christian brothers. In the very prolonged, bloody Arab-Israeli conflict, the brothers provided a steady service of education. These brothers did not have to be there. They were admired and loved. The Palestinians protected them. These teenagers knew and felt this, and their sense of appreciation flowed over to me, wanting to protect me. I only wish they did not have guns. This next piece is called "You Are a Star." This is an accurate memory of a childhood event. I could have been about 4 years old. Oh no, I was 7 years old in this, and it took place at a table in my family home in Dorchester. You are a star. Once at supper, when I was about 7 years old, my father, looking at his children, said, "You are a star. Each one of you shines." That was the first time I saw myself in terms of the sky, the stars, the universe. I have looked up at the sky, wanting to pick the one star that is me. I'd pick this one, that one, and then not again be able to say of the millions of stars, which one is me. I became all of them. I'm larger than any one star. I have stargazed in the darkness of the great eastern deserts, and in the clarity of high alpine and Andean peaks. The whole swath of stars, the Milky Way, the galaxies have become too small to define who I am. Dad, you gave me the nudge to see myself as a star. You started me on the journey to understand myself beyond the stars, the galaxies. Your love has propelled me beyond the edge of the universe. Thank you. Love song. I have a writing coach, and my very first reading at Fairfield University, she introduced me, and she said she struggled how she would categorize my stuff. But she says the best she could do, and she liked, is that Father Tom writes love poems. Well, that inspired me to write this. This is an unabashed, straightforward, unapologetic love song. But you could take it as a love song of God to us, of us to God, of us to one another. You can take this as a love song of me to you. Love song. If I loved you, we would share a bowl of fresh berries. If I loved you, we close would amble amongst autumn trees with leaves that have become the sun, and the sun red, yellow, orange. If I loved you, holding tight, we'd plunge into the beauty of the glistening raindrops, the beauty of the billowing clouds, the beauty of the endless swath of stars. If I loved you, we would sway together, both in and with the ever, forever, and forevermore, and far, far beyond. I do love you. Come. Sunrise footfalls. Again, this is an accurate description of an event on an empty street at sunrise in Amman, Jordan. I'm walking from the Jesuit community to the Jesuit center where I worked. Sunrise footfalls. It is very clear in Amman, Jordan, this area of the great Syrian desert. It is very early. The sun is about to rise. I am walking from the Jesuit community to the Jesuit center, 2 miles distant. I am walking into the sunrise on very quiet, empty streets. My steps are even, in sync with the rate of my heart. Prior to the appearance of the sun, a strong streak of seafoam green stretches across the breadth of the sky. My footfalls move steadily forward with very faint clicks breaking the silence. I pray in thanksgiving for the luminous green, the promise of day, the beauty, the presence of God. My rhythm and the rhythm of the sun coalesce, and the sun breaks through what seemed the solid line of the horizon. I'm in the sunrise. With every beat of my heart, with every step I take, I'm helping to raise the sun, both push and draw it above the horizon. God brings me in. I could be an atheist. In the acute awareness of the pain, suffering, killing, evil in the world, the conclusion that there is no loving God is compelling. I have dear friends who have made this conclusion: there is no God. These friends are admirable in their dedication to and care for people. They are stable and mature people. However, despite the compelling logic, I cannot conclude there is no God. I simply cannot be a non-believer. I have experienced much joy in my life, especially in human communication. I have encountered intense beauty in leaves, grass, flowers, stars, people. I have known much love, loved people, sea, sunrises. I have been and am loved by many people. I feel even loved by trees, grass, stars. The logic of my heart says, I love, I am loved, therefore God exists. God's dream. A note on this. This is God speaking to us, so I'm kind of speaking for God. So this is direct address of God to me and to you. God's dream. In, over, under, through, out of the very forever, forevermore, and far, far beyond, I have a dream. several butterflies flutter past us. They don't fly on smooth, straight lines. That's the dream. By the sea, large, very powerful waves begin to break, curving over with a smooth face backlit by the sun, a light transparent green. That's the dream. By the sea, large, very powerful waves begin to break, curving over with a smooth face, backlit by the sun, a light transparent green. On an early winter afternoon, by a copse of trees, snow is falling. It is not a storm, there is no wind. With a very gentle ping, the flakes touch the ground. That's the dream. We stand on a hill amidst picnic tables spread with sandwiches, holding cold drinks. We chatter as we look off towards other distant hills, silhouetted against a clear blue sky. That's the dream. Traffic stops. Two elderly folks slowly cross the street, holding on to one another. That's the dream. From the kitchen window, we gaze out at small children gleefully pumping high on the swings. That's the dream. I have a dream for you, but I can wait. This next one is a very brief piece, but I look upon the experience that this describes as one of the most important graces in my whole journey with God. This event happened, as it says in the piece, when I was about to leave the Middle East. So this is after over 20 years in the Middle East. And it's in Jerusalem. I was working in Jerusalem at this time. This one's called God Gives Thanks. Feeling down after 20 years in the Middle East, now that I'm leaving, I wonder what good I have done. I feel I have been of very little or no help. I'm disappointed in myself. But then suddenly, one day, God pierces through in words, saying, "Tom, thank you." That was all. No indication specifically what God thanks me for. Just, "Tom, thank you." But that made all the difference. I prayed much about this particular piece. I couldn't avoid it. And what I've come to with some fruit is that at this end of my long time in the Middle East and that whole extreme human disaster, God was not thanking me for the good I did. I worked for 20 years. I did creative things there. But in the light of the extreme disaster, I felt I had done practically nothing. So God says, "Tom, thank you." What God was thanking me for was I did not lose heart. And a part of the astonishment at that time was I had been a Jesuit for 40 years by that time, 45 years, a Jesuit priest. A Jesuit maybe 50 years at that time. I had never heard from anyone. No one had ever said to me in any retreat, I never read it, that God thanks us. So I don't mind saying stimulated by this grace for myself and what it's meant for me. Saying to everybody, God thanks you. This is called the swing. This is a very accurate, simple, delightful little story of an experience in New York City on 2nd Avenue. The swing. It is very early for the park. I sit in Augustus St. Gaudens Park on 2nd Avenue and 19th Street. A few rays of the sun touch the tops of the trees. This playground of children sits motionless, as if waiting for exciting young children to come. I am alone, looking across at the empty swings. I am tempted and give in. I approach a swing and test it for my weight. Alighting gently, I get myself going with a shout for my feet and then begin to pump, stretching out my legs and pulling back with my arms. I'm swinging for the first time in perhaps 75 years. Delighted. In each upward swing, I feel cool air gently falling upon me, that refreshing, flowing, cleansing presence, that constant in a lifetime of swinging with God. This is another New York story, another New York street story, Molly. I exit Stuyvesant Park this early morning and see her from a distance. At the corner of 2nd Avenue and 17th Street. She sits on the concrete, dressed in black, with her belongings beside her in a large black bag. On the sidewalk is a paper plate saying in bold print that she is hungry. In New York City, I'm always ready. I have some loose dollars in my pocket. I take out a few and approach her. She looks up and smiles. She's about 30 years old. We're somewhat alone this early in the morning, no one in hearing distance. I smile at her and say, "Good morning. Isn't it a nice day?" She says nothing. With a few dollars in hand, I say, "My name is Tom. Could I ask you what is your first name?" She is more curious, but answers, "My name is Molly." I pass her the dollars and say, "May I ask you to pray for me? I will pray for you." She is really smiling now. After a little pause, bringing her hands together like a child in church, she says, "Do you want me to pray for you right now?" I laugh. This is a pleasant first for me. I say, "No, not right now, but you could pray for me as you see me walk down the way." Looking at her and feeling that in this brief moment, the social distance of privilege and poverty has broken down, I say, "I will remember you." I turned and left. This one's called God Delights. Out of 8 billion people, if I did not exist, I would not be missed. No one would know me. I was not to be known. Statistically, I could easily not be, but I am reciting this, therefore I am. God created everything. God created me. I am like a flower planted in a garden at a specific time in a specific place with other specific flowers. If for some reason God had forgotten to create me, forgotten to plant me, God would quickly know it. whole universe, with its terrifying size, complexity, randomness, would not be the same without me. But that means also that without me, it would not be the same for God. In love, God creates everything. In love, God creates me. Without me, God would miss me. With me, God delights. If asked, I had a reading like this several years ago, and right in the middle of it, like this, a woman jumped up and said, "Why are you so happy?" That was the inspiration of this piece. I'm glad she broke in and asked. If asked, if I were asked, you have actually asked me why I am happy, I would say, in fact, I do say I am happy because I am loved. God loves me. That is the answer. But further, God loves me and I know it. I converse with God, I contemplate. This ongoing interaction with God flows over to other humans. Deep faith conversations keep me alive. Not unimportant is that I'm a vegan, a creative discipline in an overconsumptive world. God loves me, I know it. God and I converse with people, I live with discipline, I am happy. You have asked. Come, let's go. I'm not fully aware why this particular little piece affects me so much. Maybe you can reflect on why this affects me so much. Come, let's go. We have had our oatmeal. We have washed the dishes, sponged the counter. Let's go. We'll go out and love the trees, touch the flowers moist with dew. We'll love the little birds in happy flight. Our feet will press the grass. We'll love the sky blue. We have done much, but most of all, we loved. Come, we've swept the floor. Let's go out. We are not finished loving. I have this one. I actually have two that I think will be all right on timing. Singing beautifully. An ancient legend tells us there was a bird which sang a beautiful song, and then at the moment of death sang it even more beautifully. I can easily see my long life in terms of segments: childhood, adolescence, young adulthood, middle-aged, elderly, and then phases within those phases. When I reached 65, the beginning of elderly, looking ahead, I divided this phase into 3 segments. Young elderly, from 65 to 75. Middle elderly, 75 to 85. And now I'm at the beginning of old elderly, 85 to the end. I identify songs that could describe the spirit of the different segments. In adolescence, some rather sad songs would do, but overall, I have to say I have sung beautifully. Now I'm in the last phase of my life. I do not want to say the phase of death, because I do not feel near death, but I am nonetheless in the last phase which ends in death. I feel acutely aware that in this last phase, I am singing more beautifully than ever before. I am you. I am the green blade of grass on the sunlit lawn. I'm the cold emerald water pool high in the Alps. I am the tall, strong pine tree swaying gently in the breeze. I am the sea wave breaking on the broad sandy beach. I am the light, bright star nestled midst millions of stars. I am the flower grasping the rock on a steep cliff. But most of all, I am you, because you are most like God. Thank you. I have 450 more of them, but not today, maybe some other place. We're going to open it up to some remarks or questions. And first of all, I'd like to recognize my friend, Alan Bodnar. We became acquainted actually through my stuff, through a mutual friend. He is a clinical psychologist, and I've been delighted by his remarks. So I've asked him if he would just simply say a few remarks to get a conversation going. Oh, is there a microphone? Yeah.
Thank you, Tom. Thank you for that wonderful reading of your poetry. As Father Tom said, I'm a clinical psychologist and a writer, but more to the point, we're friends. We met just about a year ago, and since then we have some absolutely wonderful conversations about life, our common faith, and the intersection of theology and psychology. And we also try out our writing on one another. When I hear Father Tom's poems, I'm reminded of something that the poet William Carlos Williams once said. It is difficult to get the news from poetry, but men die miserably every day for lack of what is found there. And what do we find in these poems of Father Tom's? It's what he told us his writing coach said about them, that these are love stories in verse. These are stories of God's love for us and how that love flows over into human love that we give and receive from one another, and how this process unites us with God, our fellow man, and all of creation. This is pretty heady stuff. So if the poet isn't careful, he is liable to spin off into the clouds, talking about how many angels can dance on the head of a pin. But this poet is very careful, and he sets his poems in the particulars of everyday life, in familiar places. A kitchen, a home where a family is gathered around the dinner table, the corner of 2nd Avenue and 17th Street in New York City, where a homeless woman sits on the pavement, a swing in the park, an empty city street at sunrise, the high peaks of the Andes, and on it goes. His writing may point toward heaven, but it starts on earth. And that reminds me of something that Robert Frost said. Earth's the right place for love. I don't know where it's likely to go better. With his careful attention to place and person, Father Tom draws us into the action of the poem, and we may remember or imagine ourselves in similar situations with thoughts and questions of our own. I was going to say that I'm quite sure that Father Tom is the only person in this room who has ever walked on an empty street in Amman, Jordan at sunrise, but maybe he isn't. This is a pretty accomplished group. But we all have our own version of that story of solitude, natural beauty, and contemplation. So let's think about what our version is of Father Tom's experiences. In telling his stories, he reminds us of ours, and there is no better mark of a good writer than the ability to do just that. So now, please let your minds wander through the landscape of these poems and share what you see, feel, think about, question, and remember. The poet is in, and he's listening.
I'm going to sit down.
Thank you. So if anybody have any questions or want to also express what they have in their mind.
Thank you very much, Father Tom. That was wonderful. I have 2 questions for you. The first one is, when did you start to think of yourself as a poet? And second, did you have any significant poet influences, especially any Jesuit poet influences?
Okay, no, those are big for me. I never imagined I would end up this way, reading poetry at Gaston Hall. But the way it started was after I after I returned from the Middle East. And so I was at Fairfield University for 10 years immediately after coming from and what I did there is I led people in the Ignatian exercises. So coming back from the disaster of the Middle East, it was very significant for me in putting, I think, myself back together, of finding this language, some of which you heard here today, in my helping people in their own spiritual journey. And so within that, I fell into the friendship of several people at Fairfield University who were professors in the creative writing program. You put that together, then it happened. They didn't want to stop this whole program. It was an individual basis. So I said to them, okay, we could meet maybe regularly as this group, and we could talk about what we're writing. They were writers. I said, I have journals that I've been keeping for 60 years, and I don't know what to do with them. And I find it very difficult just to throw them away. I've never read them. And so one of the ladies, Karen Osborne, who's written about 5 novels, several of them got to the top of the New York Times list of notable books, said she would like to work with me individually, intensively on my journals. That's how I started to write what I call poetry. Some of it is more like short stories. Some of it's more poetic form. But I have a lot of trouble with contemporary poetry. I don't know what they're talking about. And so I said, no, I want to be as simple and as clear as I can in telling a story. And so I began writing that, and then lo and behold, began to take off. I'm still meeting with this writing coach every week, twice a week for an hour and a half. And she has she's recorded every meeting. So there are 377 of them. And these have been given to the archives of Boston College. They've been accepted at the archives of Boston College. So that's how that started. The writing emerged out of trying to preserve some of my journal writing, reworking that. And I said, I like that, the story very, very early on that I mentioned here of You Are a Star, what my father said to me at a table. That's preserved. That was in my journals and whatnot, and a lot of that. But then it moved into new and creative stuff, and it's still going on. It's keeping me alive. I'm near 90 years old now, and I have this new career. And in 2 weeks, I'm going to Baltimore to give a series of 6 presentations. And so as long as I can do this, it's like swinging on the swing. As long as I can swing on the swing, I will sing. A Jesuit poet who is very important for me is Gerard Manley Hopkins. The faith level there, but also a woman, Emily Dickinson. really a very profound. And she is, in her poems, conveying a very deep spiritual journey. And she, and a part of her creativity was she was not at home in the Christianity in Western Massachusetts in the 19th century when she lived. But she was on a very profound spiritual journey. The phrase that Tamar liked, it struck him when we first had a conversation, and he used it in the introduction, is, I lost my theology, but I didn't lose my faith. And what I find what I'm doing now, I didn't lose my education. But what I'm doing now, for myself at any rate, is much more simple and direct. This is actually what I believe and what I experience. And my education, of course, is very important here. I know the whole history of issues and theological issues. So I'm out of the Middle East. I've landed extraordinarily well and ironically, and it's painful for me in the sense of that tension there, that human tragedy continues on, and it's actually gotten worse. And then, all around the world. So right within that, that's one of the biggest challenges we have as believers, the violence in the world. But nonetheless, this is where I've come to. And I think one of the reasons that I'm affecting people is that I'm well acquainted with the pain and violence and suffering of the world. But within that, I'm still a believer. I still experience God as love. I love that little piece, I could be an atheist. And I'm very honest there. That's very compelling. And I know this violence of the world and the killing and the horror of it all, and the torture, the hatred of people that tears people apart. But nonetheless, the logic of my heart says I am loved and I loved, and therefore God exists. Okay. It was kind of a long answer.
Father, let me ask you, I think many things of your talk, but one of them is that it's very appropriate for this week, no? About expressing your faith week. And also I wanted to continue with what you were saying. So I lost my theology. I did not lose my faith or my education. Mm-hmm. But what about your spirituality?
What about my what?
Your spirituality, your Ignatian background.
Okay.
So how is this interfering in all your poetry?
One very significant aspect of Ignatian spirituality that has been very, and I could mention to you, this would be, I think, evident in every little piece that I write, is finding God in all things. And so that as a challenge, I must say I entered the Society of Jesus where unfortunately we had lost a certain charism about Ignatian spirituality. If you are familiar today with the Ignatian retreat, you know it's a one-to-one experience. The whole purpose of the guide is to help you to understand how God is with you right here and now. That was not an emphasis when I entered the Society of Jesus. It was not I was not being guided by any one person. We were preached to as a group of 35 people. And so there was a certain charism of Ignatius that had been lost over some centuries. About 10 years later, after I entered the society, there was a renewal, a deep renewal. It was at the time of Vatican II. And now, anywhere there are Jesuits in the world, people are invited to participate in the Ignatian exercises. And I think this is a great help to the church. And that aspect of it is very, very powerful. Helping people to discover where God is with you right here and now in your life. I think you can see in every piece I read that it really was an experience of God with these teenagers of the streets of Bethlehem, and with Molly on the street. And my God experience there was, in that few moment of exchange, a breakdown of a barrier between poverty and privilege. We had a human exchange. I experienced in her the presence of God with this woman. And she said she would pray for me, yes. Okay, does that help? That
Yes,
answer?
thank you. A last question.
Father, I'm just very curious. When you met Molly and you had this connection, how soon afterward do you express that in poetry? Is it something that rushes out? Is
No.
it something you think about?
Each piece is a great struggle. How does it happen? How did this story of Molly, I forget how soon after that, it stays with me. Now, obviously, that was a very powerful moment. I've been to New York City very, very much. I've met many street people. I tried to give a couple of dollars, but I was getting tired. There was something almost like I was feeling like a machine. I'm dishing out a couple. So I said, I have to figure something out that would be more human. So that story of actually experience was after an awful lot of expression, reflection and prayer over many years of handing out dollars to poor people, homeless people. And something was missing for me, and it was the human exchange. So I made that little theater. Now notice very clearly, and this was all very well thought out, because it's so easy to be condescending. She's sitting on the ground. I'm standing over her. I could so easily convey the attitude, oh, you poor thing, let me give you a couple of dollars. So notice in that piece, I first of all said, okay, isn't it, it's a nice day. Can I tell you my name? Tom. Could I ask you your first name? Now, I was very aware. I didn't want to really begin to say, oh, what is your name? She could think I was police trying to investigate drugs or whatnot, but I tell her my first name. And she's a bit curious what's going on here. And yeah, okay, she doesn't know what's going on. Molly. And so then, nice, it's a quiet moment, and the next thing I say to her, I said, could I ask you to pray for me? Again, you notice I didn't say, well, I'll pray for you, poor thing. I said, would you pray for me? And she said, oh, yeah, okay. And she said, do you want me to do it right now? Oh, no, okay, that's okay. So we had this human, and it was my experience in the power of this piece for me. And by the way, in my 49th, this is my 49th reading, that has gotten the most attention, this one. And I think it is because it's so human, and maybe we all have a struggle. How do we humanly communicate with people at such a far distance from us socially, either in this direction or that direction? How are we human beings with one another? We have barriers. There's a barrier between me and Molly that I'm a university person with a doctorate here and an MA from Boston College and worldwide experience. And that can so easily come over and say, oh, you poor thing, how did you end up here? So that was a delight for me. But let me figure you out. I didn't tell you the whole story. Do we have enough time that I could?
1 minute.
We have 1 minute. Okay. The rest of the story is what happened immediately after that. As I was walking away, and remember she said she would pray for me, I had a God moment that was spectacular. And I know she was praying for me. And I had a wonderful experience of the presence of God. And I describe it as feeling like God and I were like two wet towels being wrung out together, and the juices flowing together. And that was all occasioned by that incident. So somehow or other, out of all of that, the presence of God bursting out so very strongly for me immediately after the event. So that was so powerful for me. I think I was writing by that time. That happened about 3 years ago, but I had begun to write. And I think it was rather soon after that I struggled to put it on paper. But every single one of them is a big struggle, because initially I find there's all sorts of unnecessary information and how to chop it down. So this is exactly what I want to say. And sometimes I often feel this is silly. For whom am I writing this? They will find this very strange. And I have to work with that. And I've talked this out. Well, I said, do I want to be so self-revelatory? That was a biggie for me. Because behind, with a formal theology, you can be very distant. You know, this is the theology. But this is not distant. This is me out there, bearing myself. And so, yes, okay.
Okay, excellent. Thank you very much. And thank you, everybody, for being here. I want to be mindful to everybody's time. So thank you and have a great week. Okay? Thank you.
Listen, you have the copies there. Again, I would be delighted to come back again to talk with students. You notice once we get going, and once we get into individual pieces, I will tell you that in a very little piece, sometimes I spend an hour and a half on one little piece with my writer. And so I get frustrated when I have like a half hour. So if you want to contact me, fine. If there's any possibility of my having exposure to students, I'd be delighted. But thank you very, very much.